Hello guys, Tops here. Today I want to update my perk tier list for Battle Bros. I made a perk tier list over a year ago, and since then I made many more videos, I had many more playthroughs, and my opinion on a lot of perks have changed. So this was my original one. I will change this one to outdated. And yeah, as you can see, like I had some extreme approaches on certain perks. And my opinion on a lot of perks have changed. So I have 5 tiers. That's how I want to make that. I have the perks that are generally great and the perks that are generally poor. So those perks will be pretty rare to have generally poor perks or generally great perks. Then we have the special perks, which will be something like weapon mastery, for instance. And then we have defensive and offensive perks. So that's kind of what I kind of like. Yeah, it's a little bit of a guide, maybe as well. I will explain the individual perks as well. All right, let's go. Fast adaptation is the first one. Gain an additional stacking 10% chance to hit with each attack that misses an opponent. Okay, so fast adaptation is basically additional hit chance, which is an offensive perk. And it's a tier 1 perk. So we are going in order. This is the Battle Bros wiki. It's a tier 1 perk. So you can take it on level 2 if you have a first point. Generally pretty strong if you have bad bros that want the additional 10 hit chance because they're gonna miss a lot. It's generally poor on bros that have really good attack, right? Because they don't miss as often. Generally good on range bros, I would say, especially while leveling up an archer or something, or a thrower. Having fast adaptation is pretty nice. So I would say fast adaptation is a pretty good offensive perk. Next one, crippling strikes. Yeah, crippling strikes lowers the threshold to injuries. The problem with that perk is, and I tried a lot to play crippling strikes, I would say it's generally poor. You can argue it's a damage perk, but it's definitely the weakest damage perk. And a lot of opponents are kind of immune to, like the whole undead faction is immune to being wounded. The second thing is a lot of opponents are just so weak that crippling strikes wouldn't have mattered. Stuff like goblins, they have so less hit points that the first hit will injure them anyways or just kill them. So it kind of like, it really doesn't really work as well. And a lot of injuries don't affect the AI, so there's something like that. So crippling strikes is generally a poor perk, I would say, in my opinion. Not that great. You can try to make it work and tell me how that went. I didn't find great use for that until now. Maybe they change it in the future. Okay. Next one, Colossus. And I think we have a great perk here. Colossus increases hit points by 25%. Hit points are really important in this game because if you don't have hit points, you're gonna die. So having more hit points is just, it's good, right? And like this is one of these perks that I almost take on any brother, and I kind of need to have a reason to not take it. So for instance, I don't take it on my range backliners, on my archers and gunners, for instance. But on everybody else, I take Colossus. It's such a good perk. Really like it. Next one, 9 lives. This is one of these perks where I almost want to put it S tier or great perk. It's a really great perk. I would say 9 lives is probably the strongest defensive perk, right? It's like if you would die, you would basically gain 11 to 15 hit points and you get additional resolve in defense and initiative. The increase in survivability of this is so significant that like it's not comparable to other defensive stats. Like I have seen brothers get killed unluckily by like, I don't know, unlucky hits twice in a row or something, and then survive like 15 additional hits because of the increased melee defense and stuff, and then just walk away. It's crazy how much 9 lives increases your defense. And if you play stuff like Iron Man, I really like 9 lives because there are things in this game who can still one-shot you, and bad luck still exists, and I make mistakes. I'm human. So really like this one. Could be S tier, but overall I would say defensive perk. Really good defensive perk. Also, it's a level 1 perk, so makes you really defensive right away. Next one, Bags and Belts gives you 2 extra slots, and these slots don't consume fatigue, the items that you put in the backpacks. Yeah, Bags and Belts is, I would say, a special perk because it's one of these perks, like most bros don't use that, right? Most bros don't need additional backpack slots, but those bros like throwers and some hybrids, maybe your bannermen, they want to have Bags and Belts. But outside of like very specific builds, these perks are just, not necessary for most bros. Next one, Pathfinder. Action point cost is reduced by -1 per each tile traveled, and fatigue cost is halved. Honestly, I would put this perk in great because, like, on every single bro, it opens up so much play styles. Like, it gives you so much mobility. Just being able to walk 4 tiles, no matter the terrain, and not getting out fatigued in the sand, in the snow, in the forest, in the swamp, is just huge. And not having Pathfinder makes a lot of fights really, really hard. So you can completely ignore this perk and play without it, but with Pathfinder, dude, like, your whole team will appreciate that. And you have to imagine, like, in most fights, you are either on like difficult terrain where Pathfinder actually means something. It's also crucial for something like fatigue neutral builds. So it opens up a lot of builds and is generally, I would say, one of the best mobility perks in the game and one of the best perks overall. Really like Pathfinder, highly recommended. Next one, Adrenaline. Adrenaline basically makes you act first in the next round, costs 1 action point and 20 fatigue. Problem with that is, like, the 1 action point cost and the 20 fatigue is pretty prohibitive to use, and the fact that it also costs me a perk means I don't play with Adrenaline that often. It's a special perk, I would say. Unless you have, like, I don't know, an Adrenaline company or something, or you have, well, basically everybody has Adrenaline, or you have a very special plan for a special bro to outspeed Hexen or something with Adrenaline. It's one of these perks that I generally don't pick, but it's not too bad. Not a bad perk. Recover gives you 50% of your fatigue back, but costs 9 action points. So Recover is one of these perks. I don't know if I would put it in defensive maybe or in special. Let's put it in special tier. Because Recover is kind of like, unless I don't use it on every bro, but I use it on a decent amount of builds. And those builds kind of need Recover. So I use this on my bannerman, so I can rally the whole time in undead fights. I use this on my duelists and on my cleavers. So anything that has like the 4 action point synergy with Berserk, right? So with a 4 action point weapon, I can hit once, trigger Berserk, get another 4 action points, and then recover. So high fatigue usage with 4 action point weapons, Recover is still pretty nice to have. I would say mandatory on cleavers and really nice to have on tanks, right? So on either dodge tanks or battleforge tanks, having Recover, pretty nice. But on any other builds, I don't do it. Yeah, Student Gives you 20% XP from each battle, increases your XP gain by 20%. It's generally great because it's the only perk that is basically free. You take it level 1, and on level 11 you get the perk refunded, basically. So what does that mean? That means you gain faster levels, which means you can gain faster stats. So you become stronger faster. It's generally weak on bros that don't live long, like the early game fodder bros, but it is super strong on all of your late game bros. And it's a free perk, so I pick it up every time I can. Yeah, because it's free. Why not? Free real estate. I like it. Next one, Executioner. Now we're in tier 2. So level 3 is required, second perk point. Inflicts additional 20% damage against targets that have an injury. So that would be obviously a damage perk, right? An offensive perk. One of the weaker offensive perks. Again, the problem is undeads cannot be wounded, and some enemies are too weak to be wounded. So the plus 20% damage wouldn't mean much. But against hard to kill opponents, stuff like orcs and chosen, Executioner is actually pretty good. So it's an offensive perk that that struggles from the same issues as crippling strikes, but not so much. And having a lot of damage is just kind of nice. So if you try to stack damage, especially with two-handed bros, late game, the only like difficult fights are kind of big orcs and chosen fights, and this one is really good. So also goes well with something like sword lances and great swords, so lower base damage weapons to increase their lack of damage. I don't take it that often, but I like it. When it's good, it works. Next one, Bullseye. Gives you increased hit chance against targets that are in cover. This is a very special perk that I only use for my dedicated sniper. So my archer who is dedicated to shoot down necromancer and hexen. I don't use that on anybody else, and this only works for ranged weapons. So a very special perk. Next one, Dodge. Gain 15% of the character's current initiative as bonus to melee and range defense. This is a defensive perk, a really strong defensive perk. Can give you a lot of melee defense and range defense, especially early on. Problem is, the more heavy your gear is, the less this perk does. So it is, prohibitive. You can take it on dodge on Battleforge Bros. You can make a Battleforge dodge build, but generally this is more for lighter armored and lighter weaponed nimble bros. But gives you a lot of defense. Super nice. Sorry. Next one is Fortified Mind, which gives you plus 25% of your resolve. Where is it here? That's a defensive perk, I would say. You could take it into special tier, but I would say it's a defensive perk because it gives you additional stats. It's an auto pick on banner and tanks because you need high resolve. It is really good on those bros who sit on the flanks alone, and it is having a lot of resolve is necessary if you don't play with your bannerman in the team a lot. So, or if you have like a bunch of solo operators, having a lot of high resolve is pretty nice. So I would say it's a defensive perk. It just increases the likelihood of having good mood and not losing morale during the fight. Pretty good perk overall. Gives you a lot of stats. Resilient. Yeah, resilient. Reduces negative status effects by 1 turn. The biggest problem that I have with that negative status effects are not really a big issue. And the only thing, this is a very special perk, I would say, because there are use cases for resilient. I really like it on my nimble tanks, on my nimble dodge tanks. So I'm not too affected by bleeds, by dazed, or by any poisons, because my nimble tank will get hit a lot. And Stuff like Daze, Stagger, or Bleeding will just destroy him quickly. So for nimble tanks, it's pretty good. Also, if you have a special character that wants to kind of like out fast Hexen, you can make a special character you give resilient to, and then he is kind of like less affected by Hexen, so you can make him super fast, end his turn, then he gets charmed, and he's resilient next turn, he's free to go, right? Same as Adrenaline, it's an anti-Hexen perk. Very specific though. And on like just a casual pickup, I wouldn't do it on anybody. Okay, next one is Steel Brow. Steel Brow is one of these perks. It's a defensive perk. It basically you no longer get the crit from being headshotted. And I would say Steel Brow is just necessary on Battleforge Bros. You don't take that on Nimble Bros as often, although you can, because Nimble Bros already have up to 60% damage reduction. But this one is just, I would say, necessary on Battleforge Bros, so you don't get injured, because it is really hard to. You cannot attach anything to your helmet, so if you get hit in the head by like a flail, by a chosen mace or something, or by a crossbow from an Arbalaster, or like the Headhunter Nomads, the late game camps, they just shred you if you don't have Steel Brow. So I think it does more than people think it does. I would say it's a good defensive perk. It's not great in terms. It's kind of like one of these perks that you have to have if you don't have Nimble. That's my opinion. Next one, Quick Hands. Yeah, you can swap a weapon in the backpack, and this does not cost any action points. Normally it would cost 4 action points. So this is a great utility perk, and therefore I would say it's a special perk. Just gives your brother more utility. You can have a reach weapon in your backpack and quick hands to that. You can have more throwing weapons in your backpack, or you just have a bannerman who can switch to a gun or something. So really nice for certain builds, but not necessary to play the game through. And a lot of bros don't necessarily lead that. Depends on your playstyle, but it's nice to have. Not bad at all. Next one, Gifted. Gives you an additional immediate level up, which means you get a bunch of stats. And Gifted is one of these perks that is highly contested. I don't know where to put that. I would say Gifted is let's say it's an offensive perk. I would say Gifted is an offensive perk. It gives you an immediate level up, and you take the higher rolls, so you get immediately like 3 melee attack. You can get 3 melee defense, and then like hit points or fatigue or resolve, whatever you want, right? So it increases your hit chance and makes your brother stronger right away. More damaging. I would say it's an offensive perk. Pretty good one. I like it. Next one is Backstabber. Backstabber gives you plus 10% hit chance for every brother that surrounds an opponent. So it is additional hit chance, so it is an offensive perk. One of the weaker offensive perks for high-end tier brothers competes with fast adaptation, and kind of relies on having your opponent surrounded, which is nice if you specifically plan for that, or if you play Peasant Militia, where you have 16 bros. But it doesn't do much on your high-end bros that have good attack, but it can be pretty strong on your garbage bros who have low melee attack to give them more attack, basically. Yeah, good offensive perk. Next one, Anticipation. Anticipation gives you plus 10% of your ranged defense of the base range defense, so it doesn't stack with dodge, or like it does not affect the additional defense that you would gain from dodge. Gives you plus 10% of your base defense, but at least always 10 range defense. That is a defensive perk. It's actually not too bad. Some people say it's really bad. I have picked this on. I think I had a playthrough where everybody had like dodge and anticipation. Dude. Dodge and anticipation. That was basically immune to range damage. Was kind of funny. I really like this on my Bannerman as well, to have additional range defense. Yeah, I have made videos about range defense. Generally, the AI tends to not shoot targets that have high range defense, so taking this can be redundant on a lot of bros, but is really good on bros that have either really low melee defense or negative melee defense, range defense. I mean, I like to fix negative range defense with that, and it counts decimal. That's also something. So it tends to give you way more range defense than dodge does, and normally the game rounds up, but this one counts decimals, which leads to higher range defense most of the time. All right, next one. Shield Expert increases the defense that you get from shield, and also your shield damage is reduced. This is an auto pick on tanks, on anybody who has a shield, IG, my tanks. But I don't take it on anybody else. Pretty good defensive perk, mandatory for tanks. Because if you don't have that, Orcs and Chosen just smash your shield, especially Orcs, and then your tank is useless. Alright, next one, Brownie. It gives you fatigue and initiative. So from wearing heavy armor is reduced by 30%, does not affect dodge, sadly. So Brownie, I would say, is another one of these defensive perks where you effectively get more fatigue to work with. Maybe, is it defensive? Let's put it in special, that's better. It's a special perk. You get additional fatigue and initiative. And especially the initiative part is really nice if you want to make Battleforge dodge builds. So for special bits or for tanks, I like to take Brownie to have more fatigue. Yeah, so it's only for like Battleforge guys who have really heavy armor. I think that should be clear. Okay, next one, Relentless. Very special perk. Relentless increases your initiative passively, so you always go first, and the waiting penalty is removed. So unless you're making a really high initiative guy who always wants to go first, I don't pick this. But for all of these fast builds like Fencer or Battleforge Dodge, Relentless is just necessary. So pretty good. Next one, we have Rotation. Cost 3 action points, 25 fatigue, and you can swap the position with a brother. Is a special build, special perk in my opinion. I like to have it on my Bannerman and maybe on hybrid, a gunner, on my range bros, sometimes on my sword lance bros. Generally a perk that I like to have like 1, 2, 3 rotates in my team if I can. So my frontliners can be saved if they are in trouble. It's a very special perk. I don't take it often, but I kind of miss it if I don't have it. So having a little bit of it is always fine. Next one, Rally the Troops. Makes your bros that are fleeing possible to rally. So this one is an auto pick on the Bannerman, but I don't take it on anybody else. So a special perk. Same with Taunt. Taunt is one of these perks that is very specific, and I tend to not play a lot with. And like a lot of AI actually ignores Taunt, or can ignore Taunt at least. So there's still like a chance that it does nothing, costs a lot of fatigue and action point to use. I never play with that, so you might say it's F tier. But it has utility, right? And if you are that kind of guy who knows more about AI abusing and actively likes to abuse AI, so there's like a Taunt Spear Wall combo where you can basically area denial against certain opponents and abuse the AI and manipulate the AI, make it weird. but generally I don't like this perk. And I don't play with it at all. Next one, all the weapon masteries. What every weapon mastery does, it saves you 25% fatigue if you use the skill. So that alone is already worth most of the time. So I will just put all of the weapon masteries in special tier. And I think I will talk about weapon masteries in future videos. But yeah, they're all all have their additional up and downsides. And if you have a brother who specifically wants to use one weapon type, you might want to pick a weapon mastery. But most of the time I do that later in the playthrough or on like a higher level when the brother hits like a higher level, like level 8 or 9 or something. All right, tier 5 perks. Now we get into the juice, the level 6 perks. Reach advantage is the first one. Every hit with a 200 melee weapon gives you plus 5 melee defense. I am torn apart on this perk. It is a defensive perk. The biggest problem that I have with this one is it is a win more, lose more perk. So because you don't get a stack if you miss your opponent. So if you miss your opponent, not only did you not hit or kill your opponent, you also know your defensive perk is not working. If you hit your opponent, most likely maybe you killed him, injured him, decapitated him, whatever, and also you get 5 additional defense. So yeah, that's kind of a problem with that weapon. It can be used to kind of fix a cleaver with low melee defense. Sometimes that works. Can fix sword lances and great swords with low defense. So it's kind of nice if you can stack it with AoE. Some people use it on fatigue neutrals, which I'm not a big fan of. Generally, it's a defensive perk, but I think the other defensive perks tend to be better. This is very specific, and a lot of the time, if you miss, it just in those fights where you really want melee defense, a lot of the times you won't have it. Yeah, you miss a chosen, and then the chosen hits you, and you're fucked, right? And your nice perk did nothing. Okay. Next one, Overwhelm reduces the ranged and melee skill by minus 10% for each hit. So Overwhelm is a very special perk because you need to go first. You need to go before your opponents go. So you need to be fast. You need to have a lot of initiative, and then your opponents can still hit you. Right? It's just the chance that they hit you is lower. I would see this. It's a debuff perk, right? I would see this. Basically, what I see it is basically a fearsome that works against undeads and things that cannot be fearsomed. Has really, really nice benefits with AoE attacks, so stuff like guns, sword lances potentially, fast great swords. It's nice if you can hit multiple targets, especially with the gun. I recently enjoy the Overwhelm gunner quite a lot, so I like it for those. But very special, very special. Next one, Lone Wolf, gives you plus 15% to your stats, but you have to be 3 tiles away from your brothers, which generally you don't want to be. It is a very special perk that it gives you a crazy amount of stats, but being alone means death most of the time. So outside of like specific dedicated tanks, I don't pick this perk at all. But if you can make it work, really a lot of stats, super strong. Really cool. Next one, Underdog. So if you are surrounded, your opponent doesn't get additional hit chance against you. It counters Backstabber as well. So normally if you surround an opponent, you get plus 5% hit chance for each surround. With Backstabber, you get plus 10 if you have Backstabber. And the Backstabber perk, the one guy gets plus 10. And this basically negates the surround malus. And I think this perk is just crucial for late game fights and is a very strong defensive perk. It's just crucial for all of your late game frontliners. I would say it's probably one of your stronger defensive perks. You know, it's an auto pick on any frontliner that I have, on any tank that I have, underdog. If you don't have it, you're gonna feel it. You can skip it if you are patient that some of your bros don't have underdog, but generally in a lot of fights you are outnumbered, you will be surrounded, and just being protected, getting additional immediate defense from this perk is really cool. I like it. Footwork unlocks the footwork skill, costs 3 fatigue, 3 action points and 20 fatigue, which allows you to move out of zone of control. And I think this is a poor perk in general. It is like really prohibitive in terms of fatigue cost and action points cost. So I don't like it. And actually on range bros, I found that rotation is a lot of the time better. And footwork is kind of like the problem is if you have a range brother that is basically, you need to have a tile 3 in order to footwork, right? So if you are on the backside of your formation, in front of you are bros, and behind of you got surrounded by multiple orcs or something, now you can't use your defensive perk. So in that case, you could just be rotated by one of your frontliners or by a bannerman, right? But you cannot footwork out of a bad situation. On the other hand, if you have an archer and he's kind of a lone operator and you want him to be alone and be able to always get away from an opponent, you can choose it. But like generally, I don't choose it and I find it relatively poor. Yeah, that's all the tier 5 perks. Now we get to the tier 6 perks. And this is probably the best tier, because here you get your major defensive perks and your major offensive perks. I would say these 4 contenders are probably the best perks in the game overall, more or less. And yeah, this is your level 7 power spike. First and foremost, Berserk. Upon killing an enemy, you get 4 action points immediately, which means you get an additional attack with one-handed weapons. You can move 2 tiles, or you get an additional attack with a 2-handed weapon. So, especially on 2-handed weapons, that shit just doubles your damage. One of my favorite perks, the overall best damage perk, I would say, in the whole game. It's just incredible. Yeah, it's just good. Really like that. Next one, Headhunter. If you hit your opponent in the head, the next hit will hit him in the head too. So having Headhunter is a really strong damage perk. Really, really strong damage perk. It's not additional hit chance, but if you like, there are a lot of opponents that get one-shotted by headshots or that are killed through headshots the fastest. And it is a really, really strong offensive perk. I would say it's the 3rd strongest offensive perk in the game. Really like this perk. Yeah, it's also really fun. Really fun. Significantly increases your damage output, specifically with big 2-handed weapons and flails, stuff like that. Okay, next one, Nimble. If you only have, if your helmet and your body armor only weighs 15 fatigue, you get 60% damage reduction. And so this is obviously for light armored characters. And this is this S tier? Yeah, this is probably the strongest. No, that's not right. Let's put both of them in defensive. The strongest defensive perk is this one. So Nimble basically makes it that Nimble basically doubles your hit points. It makes you incredibly resilient. And Nimble is kind of the default defensive perk on every bro. Every bro that you have will take Nimble or Battleforged. One of the two. It's if you have a light armored bro, you give him Nimble. If you have a heavy armored bro, you give him Battleforged. And Battleforged basically reduces the armor damage that you take. You get 1% damage reduction to your armor per 20 armor points in total, right? So if you have 600 armor points from like 300 helmet, 300 body, you get 30% damage reduction to your armor. And that, of course, increases your survivability of your armor significantly because armor does a great job of protecting you from hit point damage. So if you have a guy who has a lot of fatigue and can wear heavy armor, you make him Battleforge. If you have a bro who is like relatively low fatigue or low hit points, you want to make him Nimble so he doesn't die. Okay, and now to the last tier, the damage perks and the defensive perks. Okay, so Fearsome. Fearsome is basically one of these perks. If you hit your opponent and you do HP damage, you can trigger morale checks more often. That's basically the whole trick of Fearsome. Problem with Fearsome is roughly half of the enemies are technically immune and almost immune. So it's also one of these perks where you really benefit from having it on your whole company or on nobody. So it's like, it's a special perk. I only use it currently on my gunners and maybe on my bannerman to basically debuff my opponents. And you, of course, can make a whole company and play around Fearsome, just like you can make a whole company around Adrenaline and have your fun. But generally speaking, it is, in my opinion, definitely not one of the strongest perks in offensive and defensive. It's hard to say if like Fearsome debuffs your opponent, so I would rather say it's a special perk like Overwhelm. It's not specifically a defensive or offensive perk, in my opinion. And the more I play around with Fearsome, the more I realize how lackluster Fearsome is a lot of the times. So it's basically a strong debuff. But it's a level 8 perk, so some people call it tempo perk. I wouldn't call a level 8 perk tempo perk, but yeah, whatever. Next one, Duelist. So with one-handed weapons, you ignore additional 25% of armor. That's an offensive perk, of course. It only works with one-handed weapons, and you have to have your off-entry, so you cannot have a shield. And it does nothing if your opponent doesn't have armor, which is rare, but it happens. Duelists are significantly increase the damage that your one-handed weapons deal, and it makes it competitive to the damage that two-handers have. But a two-hander that hits twice will still do more damage than a duelist that hits 3 times, most of the time. But yeah, it's okay, right? It's an okay damage perk, increases your one-handed weapons. And like some people like to play a lot with one-handed duelists, although I think that overall two-handed frontliners are more damaging. But that's up to you. That's more of a preference of choice, I would say. Killing Frenzy. Upon killing an opponent, you get plus 25% damage for 2 turns. That is probably the second strongest damage perk in the game. Which is, you just get more damage. Really goes well with Berserk because it procs on the same thing, killing an opponent. And then the next guy, you are highly likely to kill him with the additional plus 25% damage. A lot of the time, that makes a difference between 1 or 2-shotting an opponent. Really nice damage buff. Last one, Indom. Indomitable. Grants you 50% damage reduction, costs 25 fatigue and 5 action points, makes you immune to stuns and grabbacks, knockbacks and all that stuff. It's a really strong defensive perk. Problem is, it is really prohibitive to use. So it makes it kind of special. It's something I only do on specific dedicated tanks. It's kind of like shield mastery. I only use that on my shield tanks. And it's also a late pickup. So you have to have the fatigue to spam this stuff, and you kind of have to be survivable in order to make use out of that, in my opinion. So it's a tank build. It's for dedicated tanks, for in-dome tanks. It makes for certain fights you kind of need to have in-dome tanks. That tank, for instance, Unholds that are charging you. It's sometimes nice to have in big orc fights. Yeah, so I like that tank, that build, that perk, but it's very specific. All right, guys, I'm starting to ramble the whole time. So this is my overall tier list. I try to link that below on the YouTube page. Thank you guys so much for watching. I stream on Twitch and YouTube. You can watch me there. I have a lot of specific build videos and other tier lists to Battle Bros. If you have specific questions to perks or how stuff work, you can write me that down in the comments below, and I want to make more in-depth videos about the single perks in the future. Alright guys, have a nice day. Bye bye.